say you, can you donate your organs after death? That's a good question. You see, can you donate your organs? Yes, you can. You need to understand something here. Donating organs is not haram, contrary to what you may have been taught. We have to remember that, look, in the UK, our Islam, our version of Islam, is influenced massively by two things, by two places, regions in the world. Pakistan, Indo-Pak, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, but heavily like the Pakistani culture, and Saudi Arabia. Both of these places they probably influence 90% of the Islam we have in the UK, and maybe in America a huge amount, maybe not 90%, but a massive amount there as well. So we have to understand that these countries, whatever they say, we think that's Islam, but there are so many other countries, 40 plus more countries in the world that are Muslim. Indonesia, Malaysia, Egypt, Tunis, Morocco, Jordan, Palestine, all these places, Turkey, all these places in the world have Muslims. Even other countries have Muslims. China has a huge population of Muslims. We restrict our understanding of Islam. Just India has a huge population of... India is sometimes very similar to Pakistan, sometimes a bit different. But my point is that the views here are massively influenced. So when people say we can't donate organs, that's not true. We can. The hadith they try to use is completely misrepresented. Okay, the hadith they are using is a saying of the Prophet that that there's sanctity of insan maytan ka hurmatihi hayyan, that the hurma of an insan, of an individual, al-mar', once he's dead, is that the sanctity is the same as whilst he was alive. Now this hadith is speaking about muthla. Okay, you have to understand muthla. Now, muthla, people, is it's basically, have you watched movies like Hostel? Right, not to sidetrack, or the whole Saw genre, right, Jigsaw, let's play a game. So this mindset, right, people had, I'm just trying to give you a twisted mindset. People in the past had this kind of a mindset, especially to do with battles. Okay, so when battles took place, or raids, or when they attacked an enemy tribe, these kind of Muslim version of like these kind of Viking figures. And the reason I relate people to Vikings is because that image comes clearly in your mind. And Muslims in their very early Arabia and pre-Islam and even into Islam had that culture. They used to live off raiding each other and things like this. Now, this culture, when they attacked other tribes or they had rivalry and they beat their opponents, they would maim them and they would really go hostile and Jigsaw on them. They really would. Like, they would cut out weird parts of their bodies. They would cut out, like the famous hadith of Hind cutting out Hamza's liver and biting it. This kind of culture existed. They would do things like cut off ears, and a bit like what you saw in the Vietnam War, people making kind of necklaces out of Vietnamese ears and things like that. These people lived that kind of culture. They would do things like cut off limbs, hang it in the dead person's body, like around his neck, like maybe cut off his hand, hang it here, cut off his head, stick it on a spike. They would cut out parts of his body, pull out his heart. They would do these kind of horrific things. So the Prophet taught them that is haram. It is forbidden. And the sanctity of a human whilst he's dead is the sanctity of a human whilst he's alive. This is what the Prophet of God was teaching. He was not talking about organ donations. right? You see, that is such, you see, this is so naive that you take the Prophet and you place him in an anti-progressive kind of position, like that the Prophet is against humanity progressing. What an, you know, how irresponsible can you become? In the Prophet's time, organ transplants like this didn't happen. More primitive versions did happen. Okay, it's like the prototypes, like, so for example, having a fake nose. So so there was a companion in the lifetime of the Prophet whose nose got cut off in a battle, and he took a nose made out of gold. He stuck it on. The Prophet never said anything to him, like, hey, what the hell does that nose serve as a function? You know, it's, why are you wearing gold? Or why have you even got a nose? It's not like you can smell with it. You know, it's not like these kind of things. No. Oh, why are you wearing that nose? Just so you're changing the creation of God? Or is it just so you can compete with other human beings? This isn't how the Prophet treated him. The Prophet never said anything to him. He kept a golden nose. Like the Prophet, this is a known incident. And there were other examples as well where people did these things. These were very early prototype versions of what will come in our time as actual organ transplants. Obviously, humanity still had a long way to go before it could discover all these things. And that's all good. Allah says in the Quran, you know, do you, you know, do you not see كيف بدأ الله الخلق? How Allah began creation? سيروا في الأرض فانظروا. Go walk and look and search and discover. So this point of organs, now later on after the Prophet, within a few centuries, Muslims, like within even 2 centuries, Muslims started to do certain prototype surgeries, like they would get animal bones and sometimes mend them. They would do things like let's say a person needed something, they would use sometimes some animal bones and wrap it up and see if that could heal. Some of the early scholars speak about this. Sometimes if a person lost, like let's say a person, like for tooth, like let's say your tooth had fallen out or your teeth were broken, sometimes they used artificial things, gold. Other times they like just got your teeth and just held them there, and sometimes it kind of just sealed itself back in. And there's a whole discussion where the scholars see no problem with this kind of stuff. And Imam Shafi'i, although did have a problem with stuff like this, considering it, he considered it to be dead and felt that you have to break it back out, which I think makes no sense. But and then we come to our time when this is actually viable now. You see, people who are gifting their organs, this falls under the verse of the Quran, وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا, and who brought a soul to life, فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا, then he has brought the entire mankind to life. This is the kind of verse that relates to stuff like this. Now, I speak often about the Shaykh al-Islam of the last century and the Grand Mufti of the Maliki, Ibn Ashur. His successor and junior to him, and a student of his, but also a very senior scholar who was in his time deemed the Grand Mufti of the Malikiya, is Shaykh Muhammad al-Aziz Ju'ayyat. Now, I do have his fatwa around here somewhere, and I've quoted them in the past. But Sheikh Ju'ayyat, he in the 60s speaks about this issue of organ donation. Tabarru', they call it kind of tabarru' al-a'dha', that kind of giving your limbs and things like this, especially if a person is dead, and he issues the fatwa, it's absolutely fine. Many of the ulama of al-Azhar have issued the fatwa, it's absolutely fine. They've said it does not violate any understanding of Islam, it does not go against the Quran, it does not go against any established sunnah, it does not uproot a principle. And if anything, those hadith are talking about something else, and it actually corroborates the verse of the Quran about whoever gives life. And I think it's one of the greatest acts of charity that a human being can ever do. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's actually very scary It's a scary thought. Even if I were to think about it, I'd kind of be a bit scared, if I'm going to be honest, even though I know that I'm dead, which is weird, but I'd still, the thought of somebody kind of like taking my eyes out, you know, taking my liver out, pulling my heart out, the thought of these things are really freaky. And if I'm going to be honest, I think it's that fear that really makes people say it's haram. Nothing else, in my understanding. Or maybe some ignorant kind of interpretations. And so this is why I would just be, I'll be honest with you, I'd be kind of frightened and freaked out about doing this. If anything, it's just the fear, even though it's technically an irrational fear, but it's an instinctual fear. It doesn't make sense because you're dead anyway, and your body parts will just, I mean, in a post-mortem, they'll kind of cut up your pieces anyway. And then they'll just kind of chuck them back in and just sew it up. But, right, so the point is, you wouldn't feel it if you're dead. No, I mean, if you're asking, does the dead person feel this from an Islamic perspective? No, because whatever's in this world stays in this world, right? It's like, it's got the Vegas rule to it. Whatever's from this world just stays in this world, right? So the dead person doesn't feel it at all. But I mean the fear that you have now, even though you know your body will be dead, but you're still kind of freaked out by it. So that's all it is. And I think people who are so adamant on this rule, really, I think they ought to, if they really believe in this and they're prepared to preach it, then they ought to sign a clause that they will never accept a donor from anybody else. You know, you can't be, and they will never encourage anybody of theirs to take a donor. You know, if their parent was dying and they could receive a donor of a kidney or a liver to save their life, or their heart, or their child, then they shouldn't encourage that person. You know, if you're going to preach to people to not give, then you can't preach to take. That's wrong. I think that's double standards, and it shows the religion as a hypocrisy. So that's what I'm going to say, that if you have your interpretation, which is a wrong understanding of a hadith, but if you want to push that and you want to say this is in the name of God, then you should stand true to your principle and never allow anybody to, as far as advice is concerned, to take either. Not be the first one, you know, because these people, a lot of these, I don't mean to diss them, but, you know, these pot-belly kind of people, and you know, illnesses can befall anybody, can afflict, you know, they can afflict anybody, but a lot of them will sometimes, they'll have issues, and they'll be straight on the list. Oh yeah, can I get a kidney transplant? Can I get this? Can I get that? Can I get a blood transfusion? Can I get this? Can I give these? No. Haram. Kuffar. Can I take a kafir's liver? Hell yeah. Nah. This stuff is, it embarrasses the deen, and it betrays Allah and His Messenger in portraying the true image of Islam.